Good evening, everybody. We're talking about, I'm gonna jump right in. No gimmicks. We're talking about Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Oh, yeah.
It's the biggest movie of the month, and we're all excited to talk about it. So let's get into it. It is the sequel to 2018's Black Panther, directed by Ryan Coogler, and there's a lot to unpack. So I'm gonna start with George. I know he wanted to give his thoughts first, so let's throw it over to him.
Yeah, I'm gonna start it off with my theatrical experience because I saw it in something called D-Box Immersive, which if you've ever been to like Universal Studios, they have a Shrek 4D ride. It's basically you watch a Shrek short film and your chair moves and they blow air on you and it's like you're in the story. That was what D-Box was like. You
So
could
they'd let
set
you experience colonialism firsthand.
yeah, like basically on the armrest,
That was
you
well
could
played.
choose you could choose how like interactive you wanted the experience to be or whatever, or immersive rather, how you wanted that experience to be. And so my seat was shaking the entire time. And I don't know if that added or detracted from the viewing
Cut it
experience,
off.
but when you've got all the, Wakandan ships going all over the place and people diving into water, it's like you feel sort of some sort of jolt. And it was fun. I had never done it before. I did do the Shrek ride when I was at Universal like 15 years ago. Um, but as for the movie, um, I loved it. And there will be comparisons to the first film, which I don't think that this is on that film's level. Obviously, the glaring absence at the top of the cast. And I'm sure we'll talk about the legacy of Chadwick Boseman at length during this episode. But this film is probably as great as it could have been without him. I will, and I said this when Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker came out without Carrie Fisher being there for filming. Um, I will forever wonder what Black Panther: Wakanda Forever could have been with Chadwick Boseman, what his interactions with Namor could have been like, how his relationship with uh, M'Baku and Okoye and Io and Shuri and Ramonda, how all of that could have evolved. Um, but the relationships we do see in this film, the way the characterizations present all of these people that we've gotten to know over the past few films, whether it's an Avengers team up film or the first Black Panther film, everyone takes a step forward. And I think that's a testament to the strength of the performers, but also to Coogler taking a necessary step forward into both grief and trauma and strength and resolve. And I think he walks that line really, really well in this sequel. Those are my opening thoughts. I'll throw it around to you guys.
Mhm.
Ben, Declan.
Yeah, I feel like the parts dealing with grief were like fantastic. I think it's obviously to lose Chadwick Boseman the way it happened, obviously, just it's n- not a single goddamn person besides his like close family would have ever expected that, and it's such a loss. So it of course makes sense that like you're gonna have the sequel to Black Panther be about the characters dealing with that in the story. And I feel like they do a great job at that. The one thing that I have against this film is I feel like I kind of wish they somehow could have like kept focus on, I feel like, that underlying current of theme, that underlying current of grief that's like motivating and driving people. I feel like they sort of do it, but there are a lot of elements in this film, and some of them, not all, but some of them I feel like don't add to that. That would be the one criticism I have of this film. So like there's too much that it sometimes takes away from the overall themes that I think work really well. They're just to summarize what I was saying.
But Guardians 2 is a flawless masterpiece.
Like, where is this like Guardians 2?
Just fucking with you, man. Come on.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how to explain my feelings. I would say it's one thing is this is one of those this is a movie where I think actually being part of the MCU really helps it. Like normally if you have a sequel and like the main star passes, you're not going to make a sequel, but because it's like a living breathing world, it sort of works a lot better. I mean, sure, you have to set up Shuri for being the Black Panther again, and that sort of they have some contrivances in the plot to get to where they want to be, but that's sort of just the constraint of the position they've been put in. But I would say they did a very respectful job to Chadwick Boseman and to T'Challa in that how they dealt with how did he die in the MCU, and sort of taking the time to really respect the influence he had in that world. And certainly I'm sure the cast members felt that way, and to everyone that watched the film. So I would say it was a very respectful film. To Declan's point, I think I would say it's a pretty good film, but it's not great because they had to do a lot with this film. I would say the biggest thing is, while I like her character, Riri Williams doesn't really. It's one of those, they put her in there to tease their spinoff, and it kind of hurts the film in itself. It's sort of an interesting foil for a second with like Shuri versus Riri Williams, but they don't really delve into the differences in their upbringing, and they already did that with Killmonger and T'Challa, so it's really not necessary in the film, except to like do a spinoff. But I did like that they, Ross became a bit more important character. Definitely Shuri stepped up into the starring role. But everyone seemed, like you said, they seemed to step up. So I got to give this movie immense props for that. And slight, criticism for some of the other parts, but overall, I'd say it's a great movie.
Yeah, Ben,
Yeah,
just sorry, Max,
ahead,
to build on that real quick.
for
The presence of Riri Williams and Dominique Thorne does a great job just clicking immediately with the world of the MCU. I think she gives a great performance. I was not expecting to enjoy the character of Ironheart just based on what I know about the comic history. I was not expecting to enjoy that character as much as I did, and she gives a great performance. What I think this character's role in this film, and I agree 100% that it's setting up the Ironheart miniseries on Disney Plus. I think that this role was similar to what they intended for America Chavez in Spider-Man No Way Home. Remember, she was originally supposed to be in No Way Home, and then the release schedule got all fucked up. So they had to push Multiverse of Madness after No Way Home, and they did reshoots for No Way Home to have Ned be the one bringing Peter 2 and Peter 3 into the Declan, you're shocked by this, but this is
common. I had no idea about
America Chavez was originally in No Way Home.
Whoa! Wait, I'm so sorry. I did not know that.
They had changed the release schedule of some of those films because of COVID too. So
yeah,
they changed a few things.
So they couldn't introduce America Chavez in No Way Home because Multiverse of Madness hadn't come out yet, so they had to rework it. I'm pretty sure that's the story, right? That's most of what I remember.
I'm trusting you.
That level of role in the plot and the story and the world was similar to what they did with Riri Williams here. And I think, we're going to build on that. I don't know what the future holds for America Chavez, but
I have to disagree with that. In that, while I get your point, Riri Williams is not essential to this plot at all. In fact, you could take her out and the plot essentially remains the same, except that They had to
Really?
like,
How does
Yeah.
it get started without Riri Williams and her vibranium detection device?
oh, well, yeah, there's that, but that's also
How,
a
Ben?
contrivance. That's a contrivance, and that like that's a ridiculous plot point.
Oh,
I mean, anyone could have invented that. You got people in Wakanda, and I'm
vibranium. It is Wakanda's national treasure.
all right.
Oh, that's bad.
I
I
think
think
that
what he's
plot
saying
point,
is that she was replaceable. Like
like
it didn't need to
Okay.
be
you could have put any
specifically
Okay,
Riri
scientist
Max, you
Williams.
talk me
or
into it. I
Wakanda
will go along with this.
set up. My main point
I
is like
got you,
America
George.
Chavez works more for the plot. I mean, I don't know what her plot was going to be in No Way Home. If she brings like someone from another universe, that still is really
Well,
way
she
more
was
important. Like, fits with her powers.
going to
Seems
bring in Toby and Andrew.
Yeah, so she was going to do that in Doctor Strange. She's very essential to the plot because of her powers. Riri Williams is sort of there more as a spinoff. And yes, she creates something, but I'm sorry, it's not like a unique power like America Chavez.
Mm.
There are lots of smart people, and I'm
Yeah.
sure someone at Wakanda should have been able to make a vibranium detector. So that would have been a plot point. It's like somebody stole. I mean, they're already trying to steal stuff from Wakanda. They go and steal one of their vibranium detectors. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
She was
I
written
mean,
into the plot.
to be fair, I think it probably would have been a little bit more far-fetched that one of the other nations like snuck into Wakanda and stole a vibranium detector that wasn't using vibranium, right? Like you have Namor, who I segue, who eventually does sneak into Wakanda, but it's Namor, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes sense.
You
But
could have
like
any other
it's
scientist.
gonna sneak into Wakanda and steal one of their vibranium detectors.
You could have Tony Stark. How did Tony Stark not make one? You know, it's like
But
Made one in a
but
cave.
to your point, Ben, I get what you're saying. So yeah, I mean, I brought up Namor. Let's talk about
Yeah.
him. He's the antagonist of the film. You know, personally, I thought he was a fascinating character. Really, I mean, didn't qu I wouldn't say brought the same level of gravitas that Killmonger did, but was so intriguing nonetheless. And Tenoch Huerta delivered an unbelievable performance in his debut and was pretty captivating. So I want to hear what you guys think about not only Namor's role, but sort of like what you see next for the character.
Yeah.
I'm, def- I'm
I'll-
definitely.
You go ahead, Declan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued by Namor. I think he's a really. Namor is like I'm almost a bit conflicted on because again, he's a great addition to the MCU and I think a really good antagonist. But again, his inclusion also adds a he like adds a lot more to like the film's plot because you can't just do Shiri's story. You have to also include setting up Namor's story. But they handled that better than like setting up Ironheart. I feel like Namor like fits more properly into the story. One thing I do gotta bring up though, genuine question I cannot remember. Isn't Wakanda supposed to be landlocked? I mean, they have a river, obviously, but I do feel like okay, good. Then I'm not insane. I feel like it was a little bit strange to have Wakanda and Atlantis. Do they ever call it Atlantis?
Calican.
Calican.
Calican. Yeah, that makes sense.
But yes, you're
yeah.
yeah.
Calican, like for them to get into conflict when they don't direct like I like that was the one thing that I felt again, it's just that was the only part that felt like Namor's getting like forced into the story. I feel like it was a little strange to have it be like we need to specifically attack Wakanda first before we can then attack everyone on Earth to
Well, it
Well,
didn't
they
start
didn't
with
attack
them
Wakanda
wanting to
first.
attack Wakanda. It started with a partnership being brought to the Wakandans rejecting it, and then going from there, right?
True.
It was a far more developed story than just, yeah, Wakanda is dangerous to us. We're gonna attack them. It was no, there are equals on the world stage. we're also a hidden world that we don't want to be discovered from. Let's go join them.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a proposition to be an ally, and then, but I do think it makes sense if they're not going to be an ally to destroy them first, because they're the most advanced and most dangerous civilization. So
Who could,
And
who
that's
could,
sort of
especially if their power comes from vibranium. That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
that's sort of where they leave things at the end, right? Because
Yeah.
Shuri spares Namor in their battle, their one-on-one battle, isolated from the main fight of the film. She spares him. He returns to Talokan, and he's basically saying, after all of this, Wakanda's isolated. The world's going to turn on them, and who are they going to come to?
Mm.
So the sense of allyship between countries is a huge theme throughout this. That's what Namor's goal is throughout the film, right? He doesn't want to destroy Wakanda just for the sake of destroying it. He feels his honor is insulted by them rejecting the ally proposal. So, or the alliance proposal, rather. So, just bringing this back to our conversation about Namor, I'm fascinated to see where his character goes from here, because we've seen so many villains. Killmonger is a great example. Gore the God Butcher is another one. We've seen great villains killed off in one film.
Mm.
The fact that they chose to keep Namor alive, and
Well,
maybe he goes through a Loki arc where he becomes
it's
sort of
Kevin
anti-hero.
Feige's favorite character from Marvel, so
Wait, really?
they're not going to kill him off. Yeah,
I didn't know Submariner was his favorite. That's
it is his favorite.
Well,
Namor
the Submariner is also the oldest character in Marvel comic history.
yeah. I think his story. I think his
Oldest?
story
No,
appeared
that can't be
before
true.
War.
Captain
The
America.
longest published is Namor the Submariner.
Not oldest.
Yeah.
Longest published.
Longest
Okay.
published.
Well, okay, yeah, because they combine comics.
Just to finish my thought, I think the way that they can move this character forward is in sort of an anti-hero arc, because he's a mutant. We did get the first 6-letter word mutant.
It was almost a weird name drop.
It was almost shoehorned in there, but I think
Yeah, it was a little,
it's a little fan service.
I was a mutant.
But I think this is a really fascinating character, and his morals are very much in a gray area. He's the antagonist of this film. I don't think he's a villain.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's an anti-hero.
Yeah.
But I do find
Killmonger.
I think they did a good job changing his backstory, where he's no longer just Aquaman. Technically Aquaman 1.0.
He's the Submariner.
Yeah. No, but I mean, originally it was just Atlantis. So they have a bit more of a unique backstory that fits well with Wakanda, where Wakanda is like what an African nature ideally could be with no colonial, interference. And with Talokan, it's the response to colonialism that they went into the ocean. Yeah, very much like you said, Avatar, way of water.
Oh yeah.
James Cameron.
They went into the water.
I can't think of a better person for this to happen to than James Cameron, to have him 13 years on this movie, and then a month and a half before it premieres, we get what is probably going to be a better version of what he wants to do with that movie.
Also, having basically the entire film of Wakanda Forever being rewritten in the time that it took him to make one film.
Yeah, like for real. Like he seriously.
Wakanda Forever got written twice in the time it took him to write.
I'm willing to wait and see and judge them, because all I know is James Cameron does not put out a lot of flops.
That is true. I do imagine that it will.
I just want to see what he's going to do, because he's such a petty guy. Like when Endgame took the record in 2019.
Oh yeah.
Like, 10th anniversary of Avatar, we got to re-release.
Yeah.
And then
also
he took the record back. So
it's re-released twice.
Was it James Cameron or was it the studio though?
It doesn't matter.
It's
but
one really.
It got released. Avatar's gotten re-released twice.
And to be fair, Endgame had a re-release too, but that was before Avatar took the record back.
James Cameron is the Bethesda Games of movies, just releasing the same thing.
And also, every time I think of James Cameron, I think of that scene in Family Guy where Stewie and Brian go down into the depths of the ocean, try to pants him and just tear his legs off.
Yeah.
I always think of the South Park song.
Going back,
No,
back to
also, can we just give a quick shout out to Catherine Bigelow for beating her ex-husband James Cameron completely in the Oscars with the Hurt Locker? Like that's really funny. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. That was really funny and really awesome on Catherine Bigelow's part.
I don't know. I don't know what the relationship is.
Oh, they yeah. I mean, you know.
It could be amicable.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Yeah. Get back to that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it was a good choice to change the backstory because the regular backstory is but the personality is pretty much the same, where he very much is this, I'm going to defend, my civilization, my people first, and screw the rest of you. And I think it's really interesting. We got the Illuminati back in Doctor Strange too. Namor is originally sort of part of the Illuminati, where I guess he joins and he leaves and then he joins again. But it's a very much a similar idea, which is like us or them. And it does tie into the whole multiversal threat with like incursions and stuff. So I think it's an interesting overarching theme. It works very well for the colonial themes throughout this. Obviously, same with the first one, but it does work for the way that the Marvel universe is going with their movies, which is going to be Secret Wars, where you have to choose who's going to live and die, essentially.
Yeah, and just on the note of Secret Wars, we know Destin Daniel Cretton, who directed Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, is directing the Kang Dynasty. Ryan Coogler's name is being floated for Avengers Secret Wars.
And that would work well, since this is like, probably going to be a similar theme, which is heroes. But do you really have, another choice? Do you have to kill someone? Do you have to eliminate someone to save yourself? So
which is the struggle that we see with both T'Challa in his battle against Killmonger in the first Black Panther film, and Shuri against Namor in this film. So that's a theme. I absolutely agree, Ben. That's a theme that Ryan Coogler is very comfortable with. He does it really well. I would be thrilled to see someone like Ryan Coogler directing Avengers Secret Wars. I think he'd do a great job.
Yeah. So let's shift gears and let's talk about well, it was something we touched on earlier, but I think we should go back to it because it permeates throughout the entire film, right? From second one, quite literally second one of this film, the death of Chadwick Boseman, it is apparent, it is there, and it lingers over you the entire time you watch this film. And I say Chadwick Boseman and not T'Challa because we're watching it not as characters in the movie, we're watching it as audience members. We're watching it as people that experienced both T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman, his persona on and off the screen. But on the screen, what we're watching is T'Challa's absence and the way that the characters are navigating their grief, navigating their loss. And of course, we've talked about Shuri, but let's talk about Queen Ramonda and let's talk about M'Baku. Those are two characters that I think have some really fascinating developments from not only the first film, but from their other appearances throughout the MCU. So pick one of those characters and just run with it. What do you guys think of either Ramonda or M'Baku?
I want to run with both of them, but I'm going to start with M'Baku because I love Winston Duke. He is one of my favorite actors working right now. And, Angela Bassett is also one of my favorite actresses working right now. But just to start quickly on M'Baku, I think he fills a couple of voids in this film that are left by T'Challa, and I'll just speak in terms of the context of the world, not in the context of role in the film. Um, he is taking on a leadership role in Wakanda, whether he wants it or not, as we saw in the first film, whether he wants to help out, the other tribes of Wakanda. He's sort of standoffish in the first film, and in this one, he is taking on that leadership role. He's part of the council. He's part of the discussions. He almost serves in sort of a mentorship role for Shuri, especially after Ramonda dies. We see him almost in this, older brother type sense, and he's not trying to be T'Challa. He's just saying, hey, one, I'm here to help, and two, I understand what your brother meant, and I want to honor that by, giving you my, hand bearing club. So I think Winston Duke brings a lot of gravitas to the role, but then the character really steps up. And I really thought during that last fight he was going to die. And I'm really glad he didn't. And then at the end of the film, he's challenging for the throne of Wakanda. So he's taking even another step forward. So I love the character growth we've seen from him. I personally thought M'Baku should have been the next Black Panther before I saw the film. I knew he wasn't going to be. I knew that they were going to move in the direction of the comics where Shuri took on the mantle. But yeah, I love M'Baku. I love Winston Duke. And I'll let the other guys address M'Baku before I talk about Ramonda.
I just gotta quickly bring up, so full spoilers, obviously. Like you talking about characters dying.
Past that.
Yeah, exactly.
Way past that.
The moment when Shuri got stabbed and it showed it, I legitimately for a split second it got me. I was like, oh, she's dead now. Oh my god, and all that. I somehow believe for a split second.
What are you, 5? How did you
she's gonna
die? Oh no, stab equals death.
Hey, did you watch Spider-Man No Way Home?
Oh my god. I have been stabbed before. And it literally shows her completely okay. I'm just saying that's again, I'm not saying I bought it for more than a second. I'm just saying for that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I do have something to say. I have something sort of about both of them. So they both stepped up, obviously. We talked about that. Queen Ramonda, to me, is sort of like the emotional anchor to Shuri's anger and her grief. Because both of them sort of share, that close connection to T'Challa. And M'Baku is sort of the more wise, I guess, less emotional. He was less deeply connected, even if they had a good respect with each other. And so he has that sort of wisdom to balance her emotional side. So I think they both serve as this guiding role for Shuri, taking on more and more responsibility. Certainly Queen Ramonda also talks about, the stakes for Wakanda itself. But, throughout it, she is very emotional. Same with Shuri because of the circumstances. So I think they both fill a certain role. And then obviously Killmonger too is the sort of rage aspect that she has, but she doesn't want to follow. So I think they're all they did a good job having multiple guiding, people for Shuri to follow in the absence of T'Challa.
Declan.
Sorry, I was not expecting you to suddenly say. I apologize. No,
did I take your answer?
Wait, what was the question?
Ben said what I was gonna say.
No, I
Like,
mean,
no,
look, the question was just what your thoughts were on two characters outside of Shuri that are focal to this story and this movie in dealing with their own loss, their own grief, and what they turn that into with their actions, what they say throughout the movie. And the two characters were Queen Ramonda and
I have
M'Baku.
one last point, real quick before I forget. But I did find it interesting. With Ross, you have him sort of indebted to Wakanda because they saved his life. Um, and similarly, at the end, it sort of foreshadows that Namor getting his life saved, and now he's indebted to Wakanda, even if his people are sort of pissed at him. But yeah, that was it.
Okay, but to that point though, Ben, I'm gonna push back on you there. Do you really think that Namor feels indebted to Wakanda, or do you think he
No.
feels he's yeah, okay.
However, to a degree, I think that he feels more connected now, in that he has only been seen as us or them, and now he sees another culture that sort of has shown him mercy, probably something that he's never been shown before. So I would say that it does, well, while he's not indebted, he is actively thinking about that. Same as Ross, who was sort of like still working for the CIA, but when push comes to shove, he abandoned them and chose Wakanda.
Speaking of the CIA, real quick, and I want to hear Declan's thoughts on M'Baku and Ramonda, but can we talk about Val and Julia Louis-Dreyfus showing up? Because phenomenal crowd moment when she showed up. And I'm not talking about like, one of the great crowd moments like Steve Rogers wielding Mjolnir. But this was like a character that is so unexpected to see in this. And then she plays a big role in the movie. So we sort of get to see a new angle. And I thought maybe, we'd see a John Walker appearance too, because those two are connected. He's dealt with the Dora Milaje before. I thought maybe there might be something there. Obviously, Wyatt Russell wasn't in the film. But yeah, I was surprised. And I was saying to our buddies, Adam and Chip, when we were all watching the movie together, there was this great moment when she's asking Ross about the beads that Shuri leaves behind, or Okoye leaves behind for Ross. And Adam brought up this great, reference to Seinfeld, where Elaine's yelling like, "The beads, Jerry." And that's all he can think about. And now every time I think about Val in any context, I'm thinking about Elaine, which is, a testament to how Seinfeld lasts.
Oh yeah, yeah. I will also just say, like, it was it was a bizarrely funny moment when it's like she's talking with him and like borderline flirting with him. It's like, oh, maybe one day I'll have to jump on your Peloton, or something like that. And then at the end of the scene, it's like, all right, I need you to drive me back to Alexandria. It's like that's an 8-hour drive. Oh, it's good. We can talk about our previous marriage. And it's like, oh, they were married.
Yeah, they're dropping all sorts of Easter eggs for us.
In a way, it's almost like, oh, now we finally understand how like Val's other connection to it just the connection between the two characters wasn't something I was expecting. Maybe that's just because I was distracted too much by Martin Freeman's American accent, which is flawless and does not sound like a British man doing an American accent one bit. Not one bit. Sorry, I had to make that joke. Anyway. Sorry, as you were saying, Ben.
I anticipated Val showing up a lot more because
Shut up. No, you didn't.
I did. Why would I not?
Why would you?
Because they're clearly putting a lot of eggs in the Thunderbolt basket, and unfortunately, while they did recast Thunderbolt Ross, I'm sure they're saving him for his recast for a good moment. But until then, like, no one's there to pull the shady strings, and she exists, so it only makes sense. I mean, I'm sure she'll be in Captain America movie too,
Yeah.
along with probably Thunderbolt Ross is most likely when he will first show up.
We're also getting Tim Lake Nelson back as the leader.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
another
Ben, so I'm gonna cut you off this time, George. Uh, Ben brought up the idea of conflicting loyalties and conflicting morals with Namor and sort of where he ends up at the end of the film. But we're gonna jump around. We're gonna go back to Shuri and talk about that scene in the throne room when she has taken the not even the heart-shaped herb, but like
synthetic.
the synthetic herb is, getting the powers of the Black Panther bestowed upon her. And it's in the throne room. It's a scene we get part of that scene in the trailer for the film, which kind of bonkers when you think about it.
With a very particular part of that scene digitally removed.
Yeah. We have not a variant, but the Eric Killmonger in Jadaka, Michael B. Jordan, appearing in Wakanda Forever. And not Queen Ramonda, who, in that moment, you might have thought, like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. So we're going to talk, I think we should talk about that scene and why we think Shuri saw Killmonger and not her mother.
Fan service.
I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I will say
There's a reason. I don't think it was just fan service.
There was a reason. I'll get into it, but Declan goes first.
No, yeah, I'll just say that, like, also got to give credit where it's due. I wasn't quite as like shocked when like the Red Skull reappeared in Endgame. In Endgame, was it Endgame? Yeah, it was Endgame.
Infinity War.
It wasn't. Oh no, yes, it was Infinity. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah, when he first reappeared in Infinity War, genuine shock, but it was close to that. Like,
well, I'll say I agree with you, but I think it's partly because it was so unexpected, right?
Yeah.
Like with Red Skull, you kind of had those theories floating around.
Mm-hmm.
With Wakanda Forever, you kind of had those theories. Oh, maybe we'll get a Killmonger variant, or maybe we'll see him in like a flashback or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that context, in that way, that was what the shock was. Like,
precisely.
Not and it was like it took too long for my brain to process. Oh shit, I know that guy.
Yeah.
And by the time my brain caught up, the moment it wasn't it. I didn't have time to like feel the shock. I was just like, oh, all right, I gotta like focus now. Like something important is happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say though, it's like in a way, Eric Killmonger represents Shuri's own struggles, kind of, because like he's such a he's such a compelling antagonist in the first film because it's like there's like and this is like a very basic read. This is like many people have said this before. Killmonger, a lot of what he's saying is correct, and like his methods are wrong, but like his ideals are right. So like the fact that like Shuri sees him, it kind of in a way is like representative of her own inner turmoil that she's been so desperately trying to suppress for so long, at least until the end of the film, when she finally in a way like embraces the sadness that she feels over the loss of T'Challa and the loss of her family, really. And so I think it was a great like real character beat and like showing what she's really going through by seeing that it's Eric Killmonger that she's truly feeling and like having to struggle with at this moment in her life, kind of. I think it was a great moment. It was a great moment, just awesome to see Michael B. Jordan, be Eric Killmonger briefly again as well.
Yeah, I fully bought into the theory that I had after What If, that we would see, if not that Killmonger variant, a Killmonger variant. Unfortunately, before I saw the film, I was writing a story on it for work, um, and I just Googled Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and in the list of the cast, I saw Michael B. Jordan. So I knew he was going to be in the film. I had that spoiled for me. I didn't know in what capacity, so I thought my theory's right. Credit scene variant ties into the multiverse. No, I was wrong. Um, we got Killmonger in the ancestral plane, and I think Max, going back to your question of what that means for Shuri, as opposed to seeing, obviously you weren't going to see T'Challa, but you could have seen Queen Ramonda, you could have seen King T'Chaka, right? You could have seen, they could have brought in another actor to play, any number of former Black Panthers and rulers of Wakanda. So the
You
fact
could
that
have
she
seen
sees,
some version of like a Talokan, right? Because it was part of the synthetic that they used from the bracelet, and that would have been interesting too. Like there were a lot of different ways it could have gone.
yeah. But the fact that she sees Killmonger, I think, as Declan, pointed out, and as he sort of hinted at over the last couple of minutes, is that we see Shuri finding her way to sort of be with her grief throughout the film. She's not really given that much of an opportunity i- until that moment. And I think that this is, as Declan said, sort of a stepping off point, a tipping point, is what I meant to say, for the character, where she could lean into the rage and become like Killmonger in a sense, and just go after Talokan, destroy it, take Wakanda to the top of the world, you know, kill Namor, all of that shit. So I think this is that option for her. And I think the reason why she sees Killmonger is because she needs to confront that part of herself that maybe wants to do that, and realize, as she realizes later on in full, that the way to go is how her brother acted before her, and that's with honor. And that's saying, we fight with respect of our enemies, and even though we're stronger and more capable, we accept our shortcomings in this, you know, heated exchange. So I think Killmonger, I mean, great performance by Michael B. Jordan in one scene, steals the scene. But, you know, other than just seeing him again for fan service, he does serve a purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, George. We're gonna touch on one last thing before we close out the
Oh,
episode.
wait, I didn't get to say my.
Go for
I'll
it.
say my piece real quick, which is I think the most basic reason when Killmonger becomes Black Panther and he's motivated to do everything essentially by the death of his father, by his uncle. And similarly, Shuri becomes Black Panther right after her mother gets killed by Namor. So they're both fueled by vengeance. So it's just natural that she would see who is essentially her spirit of vengeance, versus Chadwick or T'Challa or T'Chaka, who would be a much more better presence, I guess. But also, the last thing I'll say is it's interesting to have Killmonger because Killmonger's idea for what Wakanda should be is not too different from Namor's, who is like essentially just destroy the surface world. You're
Very similar character.
technologically advanced and stronger, so yeah.
They're very similar characters, but they each have their own nuance that separates them enough to make
Mhm.
them each interesting.
But similar ideology for their civilizations.
Similar ideology and similar motivation, I think.
And it is interesting that like Killmonger's big difference is he grew up in America, so he did not get the benefit of being not known and defended like Wakanda was. So he
Mhm.
similarly got that fear for people coming to take away something like his father.
Yeah. Declan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, can I very quickly pose a very silly question to you guys?
No.
Okay. So this is posed to Max and Ben. No. How many times do you think Ryan Coogler, and we'll say Kevin Feige as well, Ryan Coogler and Kevin Feige had to directly tell Disney corporate executives, no, we're not going to include a CGI Chadwick Boseman in like the pre-production process? How many times do you think they had to do that?
I
Zero.
would bet not as many as you think.
True,
Probably
true.
zero.
Definitely
Uh,
not.
at most 2 times, and
Probably
they probably
zero.
didn't have to fight them that much on it.
Mhm.
I
mean,
mean,
Feige said almost right away, we're not recasting. And
Yeah.
I would
put
also,
that
I
to
mean,
bed.
Kevin
If they're not
Feige
putting in the
also has
CGI,
almost,
leave.
yeah, he also has, Kevin Feige almost has complete control over, creative
Mhm.
control over the direction
Mhm.
of the MCU. So, and I also think at this point he gives a lot of leeway to the directors.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a mold that there's a story they want to tell,
Yeah.
but also
Mhm.
tell it the way that that you want to tell it.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot more personality in these projects than there has been before. And I think
Mhm.
that is because they've been able to build on those successes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay.
I posed the question solely because I wanted to bring up this one point that I genuinely appreciated how they didn't do anything like it was so respectful to Chadwick Boseman. Just the complete silence when they did the Marvel logo with
Oh yeah.
consisting
Yeah.
of him and all
You
and
could
all
have
that.
just
I
said
just
that, Declan.
yeah. It would have been so easy to do it disrespectfully. They did it completely respectfully, and I completely forgot to mention that at the beginning. At the beginning when we were talking about that, I just wanted to throw that in
Why
there.
you gonna pose the question?
That is a perfect segue into what is going to serve as our final thoughts for tonight, which is the very close of the film and the mid-credit scene, which, of course, I think blends the two worlds perfectly of not recasting T'Challa and yet having the name and the legacy live on. Of course, what I mean by that is Husan, or his Wakanda name, T'Challa, who is T'Challa and Lupita Nyong'o's son.
We'll be Black Panther in 20 years.
Yes.
When the MCU
But
inevitably goes on too long.
Yeah.
we'll be in phase 50 and Kevin Feige will be 75. And we're going to be on Avengers 32.
Yeah, that
But yeah,
mid-credit scene
yeah.
when when T'Challa Jr., as we'll call him,
Sure.
says, I am Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Challa, that damn near broke me. I mean, because you've got that great moment in the first film when T'Challa, played by Chadwick Boseman, says, I am Prince T'Challa, or I am King T'Challa, son of King T'Chaka. And so this, almost callback in such a different context. I mean, the best movies make you feel something. And that moment made me feel something. And I think that's all I need to say for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I think it was like the one other thing that like border there's almost some questions of like, wait, how was she able to leave her son for so long and all that? But I feel like the moment itself was so good.
Question. Get a babysitter. This is a fucking advanced civilization.
What I'm saying is we need more exposition.
My
No,
God.
like in seriousness, it was a great moment, and I'm glad they were able to include it. What George said. It's a great moment and like a great. I'm glad they found a way to sort of keep Yeah. Keep T'Challa around more. Yeah.
Ben?
Um, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, I can close this out then. I mean, I think George said it really well. I think he summed it up pretty perfectly that the best movies, the best moments will make you feel something. And from the start of this film with the silent credits to the end, to the mid-credit scene, there were moments in this film that made you feel something. And that led to a project that you can compare it to the first Black Panther movie. You can compare it to other projects in the MCU, but I think this one stands alone in the weight that it carries, not only within the MCU, but just culturally too, right? It is an important film that is a sequel to one of the most culturally important films in the MCU. And it carries that mantle, right? I think it does that really, really well. And there's talks of a third one, uh, which is great. But I think what we got in this film is still something special. And so I completely recommend you go see this in theaters. It will leave you feeling all kinds of emotions. And it's a great way to spend almost 3 hours of your day. It's an incredible tribute to Chadwick Boseman. It is heartfelt and it's thoughtful and respectful. And that's the most that you could ask for out of this film, I think. And you know, we're gonna talk about a lot of other films for the rest of the year and into next year, but um, this is one that holds a special place and I think all of our hearts because we talk about the MCU so much that it's one that we wanted to pay special attention to and give the space and respect to as it so deserved. So that's going to do it for us tonight for the Unqualified Film Bros. We're coming back at you next week with a special episode. Going to be a lot of fun. And we're almost at the end of the year, so get ready for our top five film rankings that's coming up in, I don't know, a couple weeks. So a lot of great stuff planned for you. That's it. Good night.
Good night.
That